So, our topic for today is the Dust Bowl. And you can see from this image, and this is a real image, just how almost unbelievable this ecological disaster is going to be. Probably, if you've taken something like environmental biology, this is something that you've discussed. Obviously, this is going to be going on in the Great Depression, and so it's just another thing that's going to compound the difficulties of life in the United States. That is a dust storm that's there. I'm going to post some videos on the playlist to help you kind of wrap your mind around this idea of the Dust Bowl. The History Channel did an excellent documentary several years ago that I'm going to show in class. I'll see if I can find a copy of it to put on the playlist as well. But if you can find that or can ever catch it on the History Channel, if I can't, it's excellent. And it does a nice job of mixing the history and then some modern kind of recreations of the Dust Bowl that are really neat. It's a neat thing to take a look at. So what ends up happening? Well, basically what is going to cause the Dust Bowl is an era of drought in the brown area on the map that you're seeing there. So in a particular part of the country, this is part of kind of that breadbasket of America, where a lot of farming is going to happen. You see some northern Texas there, Colorado, Kansas, parts of New Mexico, and then the upper parts of Oklahoma. Now, this is not the parts of Oklahoma where Joseph and Shannon would have been running to. Those would have been to the east. But as Oklahoma started to fill up, this was some of the last land the government was trying to entice people to come out and to use for farming. This topsoil had been created over hundreds of years by the movement of glaciers and things like that have made this soil very rich and very good for growing crops. By the end of the Dust Bowl, though, 35 million acres of this land will be worthless for farming, and 125 million more acres will have lost most of the topsoil, right? The topsoil is what's got the nutrients in it, that sort of thing. There were some things that caused it, overgrazing by cattle. One of the things that you see with the Dust Bowl is that really, you get out past the Mississippi, and this is a lot of prairie land. So it had this really tall grass that grew on the prairies. Not a lot of trees, but this grass had adapted over thousands of years to the windy conditions of the plains. And so they'd grown root systems that were very deep and interconnecting underneath the soil. And so those roots held the soil together. Well, when you overgraze your crops or you plow that land over and over again without having anything grow, what you're doing is you're loosening that soil. And so as that soil gets loose, and then there's no rain, it turns to dust. The winds that whip across the plains then will cause these enormous dust storms. Now you may be thinking, dust storm, what's the big deal? These dust storms took topsoil from the area of the country that you're seeing there, deposited it in Chicago, Illinois, close to where we live, all the way out to New York City. There were ships during some of the biggest dust storms a couple of miles off the coast of the United States that had a quarter inch of topsoil land on their decks. And so this is being blown thousands of miles through some of these powerful dust storms. Some of them so powerful that they appeared to blot out the sun. Now imagine you're on the plains in the 1930s and you see something like this, you turn to the family Bible, and a lot of this looks like what's being described in the book of Revelation. And it's easy to see why people thought this may be the end of the world. The droughts and poor agricultural practices that lead this will leave 6,500 people dead from these dust storms. One of the things that would happen is the particles of dirt got so fine that they would fill up the lungs of people who were breathing this stuff in. And especially if you were a vulnerable population anyway, somebody with asthma or something like that, you could literally drown in sand over or dirt over that particular period of time. It's going to leave 2 million people homeless as they flee the area where these dust storms are happening. All in all, 2.5 million people will leave this territory, most of them going to California. In this California, this migration there is to try to find agricultural jobs, picking fruit, things like that. And these people will become referred to in history as Okies. Now, they didn't all come from Oklahoma, but it was the area of Oklahoma there. And so it's kind of a derogatory term, kind of a slam on these people to call them Okies. People would get what was called dust pneumonia. And like I said, dust pneumonia was when your lungs would fill up with this dirt. The roughest one of these was in April of 1935. It was a day that becomes known as Black Sunday, when you had the worst of these dust storms. But really for these 6 years, 1930 to 1936, you're going to see a lot of these dust storms that are happening. And really the only thing that's going to fix it is rain, right? Or rolling back some of these agricultural practices that have been causing these issues.